Hi, I'm Lou, and this is Lily-Roe, who's having a sleep. And thank you for tuning in to our series, Little Lessons from Lily-Roe, Baby Wisdom for Forest School. So Lily-Roe is now 16 months old and kind of in that language acquisition phase. So I've been thinking a lot about the meaning of language and how I've kind of come to the conclusion that language can be a filter for our perception of the world around us. So Lily-Roe, I'm pretty sure, can understand the majority of what is said to her, but she can't yet verbalise words in an understandable form to other people, which I guess must be quite frustrating actually, if you can understand what everybody else is saying but you can't make yourself understood. However, she does make sounds and gestures and communicate in her own way, and she is starting to say certain words. She says up, and today when we were walking through the sheep field, she also baa at the sheep. So she's obviously communicating, but she's just collecting all the words. So this made me wonder what it must be like to not have a language to map the world with, like a very young child before they acquire the language. And it made me think about a story I've heard, I can't remember where, and I don't know if it's true, but it's still a nice metaphor even if it isn't true, that apparently the indigenous peoples of the east coast of America, when the big sailboats with the Europeans first kind of were coming to the shores, they didn't see the boats because they couldn't see the boats because they'd never seen a big sail ship like that before. They had no language for it, and apparently they described them as strange clouds coming, and they didn't see the ships. And so it made me wonder, you know, as a metaphor, can we see things if we don't have a language to talk about them? I mean, our language acquisition is something that is unique to the human species. We share an awful lot with our brothers and sisters of the rest of nature, but our breadth of language is something unique to humans. And I wonder whether we're so kind of tied up in our language, whether it can filter out things, and maybe we don't notice things that we can't express in language. And so this made me think about, well, raising small children and the words that we choose to use with them, and also the vocabulary that we choose to use. And I know it can be very easy sometimes to underestimate young children, babies and toddlers, because, you know, they're little and they are new to the world and they haven't got much life experience yet. And so there can be a danger in underestimating their capabilities. So for example, when we're out in the woods, I try to tell Baba the name of the birds that we see, as well as saying it's a bird, rather than just going bird or birdie. One of the words she has started to say is duck, and so every bird is a duck at the moment. So, you know, just gently going, oh yes, a duck is a bird, but a jay is also a bird. Can you see its blue flash on its wings, and kind of describing why it is a jay. And although she can't say those things now, I'm pretty sure she'll understand those elements, and as she grows and is able to express language, I hope then she will be able to use that vocabulary appropriately, rather than be limited by just the word bird to explore the hundreds of species that are here. And I guess this brings us round to thinking about nature connection, like we have in previous videos. Maybe our language of nature and appreciation of nature has been limited in some way because we don't necessarily spend a lot of time outside. We might not have grown up in families. Speaking of growing up outside, there's a big party of school children just going past, which is lovely. And they are whooping and shrieking, and somebody jumped out at them and they are orienteering, not connecting with nature, but you know, they're outside. So I'm wondering whether a restricted vocabulary around nature might be one of the factors that contributes to difficulties connecting with nature. Can we see the wood for the trees, as it were, if we're not familiar with those trees? However, there is the other side to the argument, where I believe also in this culture we do get fixated on naming things. This stereotype kind of field studies outdoor learning, or science curriculum based outdoor learning, which is a checklist of leaves and the name of the species of the tree that the leaves come from, and you just go along to kind of tick that now the name of an oak leaf or a sycamore leaf. And yet that name doesn't really tell you anything about the species at all. It doesn't tell you what it smells like in spring. It doesn't tell you the texture of the bark. It doesn't tell you about the life cycles of the other animals and plant species that perhaps connect with it through complex food chains. So a name also doesn't really give us that relationship of things to do with connecting with nature either, but maybe it's a doorway possibly to it. Perhaps. I know some people really, really like names. They really like knowing the names. In fact, they'll collect like the scientific names of all the species because they really like names that much, and maybe for them the name is helping them to make that first step of a relationship, a bit like a handshake perhaps. Maybe finding out the name of something is like a handshake. So does language affect our perception of the world around us? And if it does, what can we do at Forest School to support this? Well, I guess in Forest School we're in a great place to support with language development. Again, thinking of vocabulary, there's so many new words to the children in our care, and as I say, don't underestimate the little ones. Use all the vocabulary with the little ones as well. Often little ones love big words, like the names of the dinosaurs, for example. They love big words. So there's the name of the species, there's the name of the tools that we use, the equipment, and the knots that we use. There's a whole richness of vocabulary, and we don't have to teach it like in a checklist or like flashcards. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying just use that vocabulary, don't hold back, and people will acquire that vocabulary just naturally, just like Lily-Roe's doing by hearing people speak all around her. Another great thing about Forest School is that there's space and time and non-judgment to use language, to find your voice, to be heard. There's a purpose for language and speaking, because I might need to ask someone to help me with something. Can you hold this rope whilst I tie the knot so we can rig a shelter? There's a real purpose to using language, and therefore a very rich place for language development. And I've noticed in the past at Forest School, sometimes that can be quite surprising to teachers or people who work with the group outside of Forest School, because some of the other things are obvious, like physical health benefits of being out here, are fairly obvious. Kind of the science kind of world knowledge and understanding of the world is fairly obvious, but sometimes the language bits surprise people, just how much opportunity there is, and to the fact that sometimes selective mute children have spoken for the first time out in Forest School, because I guess it's a more comfortable place to speak. And so this ties in with the emotional development aspects of Forest School, particularly around emotional literacy. So don't hold back in terms of the breadth of vocabulary words out here, but also the breadth of emotional words out here as well. And in the same way, I wonder if we haven't got a vocabulary for our complex, nuanced emotions, perhaps that limits our perception of what's going on for us in our bodies and in our minds and in our hearts. And so forest school can be the perfect place to enrich people's emotional vocabulary by, again, modelling that, talking about our own feelings, talking about how we manage those emotions. Maybe we have coping strategies that we use, because I've met children who they don't know what's happening in their body because they haven't got a vocabulary around it. So I used to teach in the classroom, and one of the children there had quite complex needs around his anger, but he didn't know that he was getting angry. He just felt like a volcano was going to go off in his tummy, and he didn't have the words to describe what he was feeling. So that emotional richness of being out here in community in a non-judgmental way, modelling language for emotions as well, can be a really powerful thing in terms of helping people tune in to themselves and be able to express themselves more fully too. Do you have any thoughts about language and perception? Do let me know in the comment section below. If you've enjoyed this video, do give us a thumbs up and consider subscribing to our channel so you can join us again in the woods next time. And thanks for watching. Language may filter perception, which in turn may affect connection. A diverse, broad vocabulary is what we can model next time we head to the trees. Yeah.